She was building her cabin one log at a time, unaware the cowboy watching was a widow rower longing for a family. Montana Territory, late afternoon in early November 1891. The afternoon light slanted low, washing the pines and spruces in pale gold. Snow clung to every branch, muting the clearing in the kind of hush only wilderness could hold. A cabin skeleton rose out of the frost, its log walls rough but steady, its frame a promise more than a home. Wind slid through the gaps in the wood, carrying the sharp tang of pine sap and the first whispers of winter. "Miss, I thought this place was abandoned. Clearly, I was wrong." The voice came from the tree line, low, calm, touched by the slow drawl of a man used to silence and saddle hours. Eleanor Sullivan froze, one hand braced against her lower back, the other wrapped tight around the hammer. She turned. A man on horseback watched from beyond the clearing, his bay gelding shifting against the frost. Her pulse kicked hard. She hadn't seen another soul in over a week. Not since the Kowalskis dropped off a sack of flour and a warning about early snow. "This land is mine," she called. "If you're lost, head back west. Nothing here for you." The man tipped his hat, easy as breath. "No trouble meant, ma'am. Just riding the boundary of my family's ranch. Clayton Hartwell, Circle H, 10 miles north." His eyes flicked from the half-built cabin to her worn gloves, her swollen belly. "Didn't expect to find anyone building alone. I prefer it that way." Clayton swung down from the saddle, movements practiced, boots crunching over frozen grass. He led the horse a few steps closer but stayed a careful distance. "No offense. Just, most women don't take on work like this." His gaze lingered on her stomach. "Especially not in your condition." Eleanor lifted the hammer and drove a nail clean through the plank. "I didn't come here to fit most women. I came here to start over." He studied her in silence, not pitying, measuring. "Fair enough," he said at last, raising his hands as though to show he carried nothing sharp but honesty. "Just figured you might want help with the heavy lifting. Carrying a child and a cabin at once. That takes grit. I've got grit. What I don't have is time for charity." She heaved another log plank into place. Slower this time, heavy with the child under her ribs, but unyielding. "So if it's pity you're offering, take it back to Circle H." Clayton's jaw set. What he saw wasn't a woman breaking. It was a woman holding the world together by sheer force of will. "Not pity," he said finally. "Respect." For a moment her hammer stilled. She glanced at him, really looked. His bearing spoke of comfort, yes, but there were lines at his eyes carved deep by loss. His hands were calloused, his clothes practical, and his expression, steady, unhurried, carried something rare. Understanding. "I've had enough of people trying to fix me," she said softly. "I'm not broken, just building." Clayton inclined his head. "Understood." He mounted again, pausing at the tree line. "If you change your mind, ma'am, Circle H isn't far." Eleanor didn't answer. She only watched him ride into the trees, his figure swallowed by snow and shadow. When he was gone, she leaned against the wall frame, lungs uncoiling. The child stirred low in her belly. She pressed a hand to it, whispering, "That's not the kind of man who passes through by accident." And though she would never speak it aloud, her heart had stirred too. Not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. 3 days later, the sun hung low over the frozen prairie, long shadows stretching like dark fingers. Eleanor braced herself against the rough cabin wall, a plank of pine balanced against her shoulder. Her back throbbed with every breath, her fingers numb from cold. The baby had shifted low, adding weight to every step. Still, she worked. She had to. Every foundation stake, every log, every nail, her hands alone. Food stores packed in the cellar. Chimney smoking clean. Yet the walls gaped unfinished, and the snow whispered of harder days. She set the plank down with a grunt. Pain lanced across her side. She stilled, jaw clenched. "You're pushing too hard." The voice came from behind. Familiar. Deep. Her heart jumped as she turned. Clayton Hartwell stood at the edge of the clearing, reins in one hand, a bundle wrapped in checkered cloth in the other. He looked less polished today. No vest, no gloves. Just a wool coat, dusted with frost. I didn't ask for company. No, he agreed softly, stepping closer. But I figured I'd come anyway. He laid the bundle on a stump. Tea for nausea. Some baby clothes my mother knitted. She said you'd pretend not to need them, but she sent them anyway. Eleanor's throat tightened, though she kept her face hard. Clayton glanced at the cabin walls. You've done all this yourself. Every nail. He nodded, respect plain. Impressive. Painful too, I imagine. Her arms folded across her chest. Why are you really here, Mr. Hartwell? Slumming? Gathering stories to tell your mother? His gaze didn't waver. I came because I wanted to, because I don't like the thought of you fighting through the cold and pain alone, when it doesn't have to be that way. I'm not a charity case. I never said you were. Her voice cracked sharper than she meant. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. Men like you, help always comes with a price. Expectations. Judgments. The morning frost held her words between them. Clayton didn't argue. He didn't try to step closer. He only stood steady in the cold, letting the silence prove he wasn't here to claim, only to stay. Clayton's voice dropped, steady but soft. Some people offer help not because they think you're weak, Eleanor, but because they admire your strength. She blinked, caught off guard, her breath stalling in her throat. I've seen plenty of folks fold under less than what you carry, he continued, his tone quieter now, almost reverent. But here you are, building something real, alone, with no one watching, no applause to chase. That's not weakness. That's rare. Her mouth went dry. She swallowed hard, searching for words, but none came. I won't stay, Clayton added, gesturing toward the bundle in his hands. Just thought you could use the tea. And maybe a reminder that not everyone who shows up is looking to fix you or claim you. She looked from the bundle to him, unsettled in a way no flirtation ever had. He meant it, every word. You can leave it there, she managed finally, her voice rough but steady. He nodded once, turned, and walked back toward his horse. Eleanor watched him go, her pulse louder than the wind. When he vanished into the trees, she released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. At the stump, she unfolded the cloth. Inside lay 3 tiny knit garments, soft yellow wool stitched with painstaking care, and a tin of tea leaves fragrant with ginger and mint. For the first time since she had set foot in Montana, something inside her cracked. Not enough to break her, just enough to feel. A week later, the wind returned, slipping through the cracks in the unfinished cabin walls, rattling nails like loose bones in a bag. Eleanor sat near the outline of a future hearth, her hands red from lumber, her breath clouding white. Clayton knelt across from her, setting another log beside the growing stack. They had worked all morning in silence, not the heavy silence of avoidance, but the steady rhythm of shared labor. The thud of hammers, the scrape of saws, the occasional laugh when a board splintered wrong. A strange harmony neither dared name. He handed her the canteen. She drank without hesitation. You're half my size, he said with a wry smile, brushing sawdust from his sleeves. Yet you're working twice as hard. I had to, she murmured, staring into the stubborn little fire. I didn't have the luxury of waiting for someone else to save me. He eased down beside her, drawing his coat tighter. She didn't look at him when she spoke again. I was married once, in Boston. Proper ceremony, ivory gloves, roses, the whole spectacle. 6 months later, he walked out, said the child wasn't his. Clayton turned his head slowly, his gaze unreadable. I never told him the truth, she whispered. That the child was his, that the dates lined up. Didn't see the point. He left before I could speak the words. The silence pressed between them, colder than the wind. The divorce was never finalized, she admitted at last. Legally, I'm still his wife. Clayton's jaw tightened. That's a heavy weight to carry. Her gaze dropped to the boards beneath them. It's not something I lead with, Out here, people already see me as damaged goods. Add married woman, and the door slams shut before I've even touched the handle. He gave a slow, quiet nod. People are quick to judge what they'll never understand. She glanced sideways. You haven't asked if I still love him. No, he said softly. I figure if you did, you wouldn't be here. Her throat tightened. She blinked once. Then again. What about you? She asked, voice barely above the crackle of the fire. You don't strike me as the type who rides alone just for peace and quiet. He looked toward the snowy ridges. His voice was low, but steady. Her name was Sarah. My wife. We married young, too young, maybe. She loved racing horses. Took a gelding too fast one morning. Broke her neck on the ridge east of our ranch. Eleanor's breath stilled. I found her myself, he continued. I was 28. That was 5 winters ago. Since then I mend fences, ride when I can, keep to myself. Not because I'm afraid to love again. Just never saw the point. Her eyes softened. I'm sorry. So am I. He paused, then added quietly, but I'm still here, and so are you. The wind howled against the unfinished walls, but for a moment, the timber seemed to hold firm, as though refusing to let the storm inside. By autumn's first frost, the wind carried more than cold. It carried voices. Rumors snaked through Willowbrook, twisting into every parlor, shop, and Sunday pew. A woman living alone, too proud for charity, too stubborn for society's mold. Worse still, a rancher's son seen too often riding south, staying too long near a cabin half-built in silence and resilience. Eleanor endured the whispers at the general store, the clerk's smile growing thin, the Kowalski's questions clipped. She held her head high until the morning a carriage she did not recognize rolled into her clearing. The woman who stepped down moved with deliberate grace, her coat imported wool, her gloves lambskin, her hair an intricate crown of pins. Power radiated from her like cold fire. Miss Sullivan, she said crisply, I am Victoria Morrison. I imagine my name has reached you. I know of you, Eleanor replied evenly, one hand instinctively resting against her swelling belly. Victoria's gaze swept over the cabin, the raw timber, the unpainted porch, the sawdust clinging to Eleanor's skirts. Then her eyes settled coldly on her face. Then I will be brief, Victoria said. Whatever arrangement exists between you and Mr. Hartwell, it ends. Now. There is no arrangement, Eleanor answered. Then end the association. His visits. Your silences. The town has already written its scandal. And my fiancé's name is inked across every page. Eleanor's pulse thundered in her ears. He's a free man, Miss Morrison. I never asked him to come. But you never sent him away, Victoria snapped, her composure splintering. You let him stay. You let him help. And now my fiancé hesitates to set a date while half of Willowbrook wonders if he fathers another woman's child. Eleanor's voice sharpened. I built this cabin myself, split my own firewood, sewed clothes for a child who will never know legitimacy. I've asked nothing of your fiancé but kindness. I have kept to myself. Not enough, Victoria hissed. Your presence haunts him. Your silence lets the world imagine the worst. Cold mist curled from her lips as she drew a breath. Leave. Sell this land. Vanish east or into some other town that will take a woman like you. But do not stay here. Not where he can see you. Not where his future is whittled down by scandal and sympathy. Eleanor felt heat rise in her face. You do not own him. No, Victoria said, her tone like steel. But I know how men work. They fall in love with suffering dressed as strength. But they marry respectability. They marry convenience. The path of least resistance. She stepped back toward the carriage, her eyes still locked on Eleanor. Make it easier on him. Easier on us all. Before this ends worse. The carriage wheels disappeared into the forest, leaving only silence. Eleanor stood unmoving on the porch, shawl clutched tight, the cold gnawing through wool and bone alike. Her breath came ragged, a ghost in the winter air. Later, she would sweep the porch, She would restack the logs Clayton had split last week. She would boil tea, hold the cup between trembling hands, and feel the child's restless kicks beneath her ribs. But for now, she simply stood there, body aching, heart heavier than any timber she had ever carried. The wilderness stretched before her like an unbroken question, a place both refuge and prison. Her voice barely stirred the air when she whispered into the emptiness. Am I destroying the only good man who ever looked at me without pity? Early winter pressed its hand against the land. Snow fell steadily, blanketing the earth in white, muffling every sound beneath a hush that felt holy. Smoke curled from Eleanor's chimney into the still sky. She sat by the fire, tea gone cold in her tin cup, her mind circling the words Victoria Morrison had left behind. They had cut deep, not with the blade of fear, but with something far more dangerous. Doubt. Every gust of wind rattling the pines felt like an omen. Every creak of the cabin walls made her brace for the sound of Clayton's voice. Hard, disappointed, condemning. Yet when he came, he brought none of that. Hoofbeats reached her ears first, slow, deliberate. A knock followed, but she was already at the door, pulling it open. Snow clung to Clayton's shoulders and the brim of his hat. His cheeks were red with cold, his eyes steady, unyielding. Eleanor, he said, voice low and calm. I need to talk to you. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. I should be exactly here. He stepped inside, shaking off the snow, removing his gloves. The firelight flickered against his face. His movements were different now, no hesitation, no careful distance. Only resolve. Eleanor wrapped her arms around her belly, protective, as if she could shield both herself and the life within from what was coming. I went home, he said, his voice carrying a weight that filled the room. I told my father the engagement was off. I told him I would not marry Victoria Morrison, that I would not build a life on lies. Her breath caught. He was furious, Clayton continued evenly, threatened to cut me off, called me a fool. But I didn't back down. Clayton, she began, but he raised a hand. I'm not telling you this to win your admiration. I'm telling you so you understand. This is not rebellion, not pity, not some reckless fancy. This is me choosing what is real. You, this place, that child. He stepped closer, his voice gentling. I've seen more truth in the way you lift a hammer than in every ballroom I've ever been dragged through. Her throat tightened. You cannot throw your future away on a scandal. I'm not throwing anything away, he said, firm but quiet. I'm building something new. The fire crackled. Silence stretched long between them. Finally, Eleanor turned toward the flames, her voice barely audible. There is something you don't know. Something I should have told you long ago. Clayton's silence was patient, steady, as if bracing for any storm she might unleash. I am not divorced, she said, the words cutting the air like frost. Legally, I am still married to Charles Whitmore, the man who left me the moment he learned I was expecting. I thought it was over. I left Boston believing he would file the papers. But no decree ever came. I didn't have the strength to chase it. I just wanted to disappear. She turned to him now, eyes burning with shame. I am not a widow. I am not free. In the eyes of the law, I am another man's wife. And before you throw your life into ruin for me, you deserve to know the truth. The confession hung sharp and heavy between them. Clayton stepped forward until only inches separated them. He took her hands, hands roughened from labor, hands that had built her own survival. His grip was steady, firm but gentle. You think this changes how I feel? He asked softly. She tried to pull away, but he didn't let go. It only makes me want to fight harder for you. Her breath stuttered. I've seen what you've endured, he continued. I know the cost you've paid and still you stand. Still you build. That does not make you a burden, Eleanor. That makes you braver than anyone I know. Her voice cracked. I can't offer you anything. Not a name, not a future, not even certainty. Only this snow silence, and a child that hasn't yet drawn breath. You've already offered me the truth, Clayton said, And that is more than anyone else ever has. For the first time, she looked fully at him. What she saw was not pity, not charity. It was love. The fire glowed behind them, the wind sighed against the cabin walls, and the weight in her chest, though not gone, shifted, no longer hers alone to carry. Deep winter. Moonlight silvered the snow-covered clearing, the pines whispering in the distance. The cabin stood firm against the storm, a stubborn heartbeat in the wilderness. Inside, Eleanor sat at her workbench, fingers tracing the carved edge of the cradle she had built. Her pulse raced with something nameless. Not fear, not joy, but a suspended breath too long held. Clayton stood near the fire. His shadow stretched long across the floor like an unspoken vow. "You should not have come back," she said quietly. "You knew I would," he answered. Her gaze flickered to his, then away. "It doesn't matter what we feel. We can't undo the law. We can't silence the judgment." "I'm not here to rewrite the law," he said. "I'm here to write something true." Her hands pressed to her lower back as the child shifted within her, kicking hard as if sensing the storm inside her chest. "You think love will make this easier?" she whispered, voice frayed at the edges. "It doesn't. Love doesn't silence gossip. It doesn't erase old papers stamped with divorce. It doesn't buy land, raise a child, or shield a woman from a town waiting for her to fail." "I don't care about the town," Clayton said, his voice even, but edged with steel. "You should." Eleanor's reply came sharp, trembling. "Because the town will care about you. About the son of Circle H choosing a married woman with a child out of wedlock and a past no one forgets." Clayton's jaw flexed, his silence heavy before he finally spoke. "He's not a bastard. He's yours. That makes him better than most men I've known." The breath caught in Eleanor's chest, as if he had struck something hidden deep inside her. She turned away, bracing herself against the window frame, her hand trembling. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I've spent every night for months wondering if I was strong enough to do this alone. And now, when someone offers to carry some of that weight, all I feel is fear." Clayton crossed the floor without a word, until the warmth of his presence pressed close at her back. His voice came low, steady. "Why fear?" Her answer cracked. "Because I've loved before, and I was wrong. Because I believed words that turned to ash in my mouth. Because I trusted a man to stay, and he left without even asking if the child was his." Clayton stood still for a long moment. Then softly, "And now you think I'll do the same?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. His hand rose, resting gently on her shoulder. Not a claim, not a demand, only a tether. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "I know what it is to lose someone, to have the ground ripped out from beneath you. My wife." He swallowed hard, eyes closing for a heartbeat. "She died on a morning that started like any other. One moment she was laughing at my coffee being too strong. The next she was gone. No warning. No chance to say goodbye." Eleanor turned slowly, her face stricken. "I buried her under a cottonwood," he went on, voice breaking in places he could not mend. "Since then, I've lived like the world owed me nothing. I stopped believing in fate, in joy, in any of it." His eyes locked onto hers. "Until the day I rode into your clearing and saw you, hammer in hand, driving a nail like it had wronged you. That's when I knew. You weren't some lost women I stumbled across. You were the fire I didn't know I needed." A startled laugh broke from her throat, half sob, half disbelief. "I don't want to lose that," he said, his voice stronger now. "Not because of laws I didn't write. Not because of people too afraid to build something of their own." Her hands rose, trembling, touching his wrists but not pushing him away. Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to let you in. I've built so many walls. I don't even remember where the door is." He leaned his forehead to hers, his breath unsteady. "Then let me help you find it." The world narrowed to just them. Snow whispering against the windows. Fire humming in the hearth. A fragile thread of hope, pulled taut between two battered souls. Clayton's voice fell to a whisper. "I lost my wife once. I won't lose you too. Not when I've finally found something worth keeping. Her eyes closed, and for the first time in years, she did not feel alone. By late afternoon, the sky had darkened to lead. Eleanor gripped the porch railing, the wind snapping her skirts, the pines groaning like mourners. The child inside her pressed and kicked, restless, as though he too felt the storm gathering. Snow fell heavy and fast. Within an hour, the world was white, swallowed whole. Eleanor lit every lamp in the cabin, laid out towels, boiled water, her pulse thundering with dread. Then the pain struck, a contraction sharp as fire. She doubled over, gripping the table, gasping. Not now, she whispered. Please, not like this. She was alone. Miles away, Clayton saddled his best horse. Instinct screamed louder than reason. She needed him. He rode into the storm, but the white swallowed him whole. His horse slipped on ice, throwing him into a frozen creek. Agony tore through his shoulder. Breath left him in a violent rush. Snow covered his lashes. She needs me, he rasped, forcing himself upright, dragging his body from the water. The horse was gone, but he walked, one step at a time. Waist-high snow, wind clawing like a beast. At the cabin, Eleanor fought. She screamed, bled, begged. The storm rattled the walls as though it would tear the house apart. And then a cry, a new voice. Raw, perfect. Her baby. A boy. She sobbed, cradling him close, pressing her lips to damp skin, whispering every prayer she had ever known. But Clayton had not returned, and the storm only howled louder. Fear gripped her chest. What if he was gone? What if she had lived only to lose the one man who saw her not as burden but as beloved? She rocked her son, tears falling silently. You'll be safe, she whispered, even if it's just me. A knock faint, then again firmer. She froze. The door opened. Clayton staggered in, snow clinging to him like a shroud, blood seeping through his shirt. He dropped to his knees near the fire, steam rising from his coat. His breath came ragged, shallow. And then his eyes found hers, and the child in her arms. Their gazes locked. No words. His hand reached out, trembling, brushing the baby's tiny fist. Looks like you've already built a family, Miss Sullivan, he whispered. Mind if I join? Her throat closed. She could have said no. Should have, maybe. But instead, she shifted the baby into his arms. Only if you're sure, she whispered. Clayton's lips trembled into a faint, aching smile. I've never been more sure. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside that little cabin, a new kind of warmth had taken hold. Not just from the fire or the stew simmering on the hearth, but from something deeper. A sense of belonging neither of them had dared to dream of. A home, promise, a beginning. For the first time in years, Eleanor knew she was not alone. The first sign of spring was not the wildflowers, nor the melting snow, but the soft give of the earth beneath her boots. Mud welcomed her steps. Birds returned to the sky, their songs weaving through the pines, and the sunlight carried with it a faint, hopeful sweetness. Inside, the fire still burned, but the warmth also came from laughter. Two voices that had once known only silence. Eleanor stepped out with a bucket in hand. Her newborn son pressed close against her chest in a linen sling. Clayton was outside already, sleeves rolled, shoulders steady, driving the first post for what would soon be the new kitchen. This soil's thawing early, he called, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow. She smiled back, shifting the baby. Or maybe it just knows we've got work to do. Clayton laughed, brushing dirt from his hands. Either way, we'll need more room, especially for that growing boy of ours. They had named him Thomas. No grand speeches, no arguments, it simply felt right. A name strong enough to stand, steady enough to last. That afternoon, Eleanor sat at the table, pen trembling slightly as she signed a letter addressed to a Boston law office. Her formal request for divorce from Charles Whitmore. The final tether to a past that had cost her everything. She sealed it with a firm hand, and as the wax cooled, the weight on her chest eased. Clayton came in then, sawdust on his sleeves, sunlight spilling across his shoulders. His eyes caught hers, then the envelope. "You did it," he said quietly. She nodded. The last piece of the past sealed and sent. He bent, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I'm proud of you." They didn't celebrate with rings or a preacher. No witnesses in starched collars, no gilded vows. Instead, they gathered with the Kowalskis and a handful of neighbors for supper. Ella Laner made stew, Clayton strung lanterns along the porch. When the sky turned lavender, he rose, took her hand, and spoke with a voice roughened by truth. "She is the strongest woman I've ever known. I thought I came here to help her, but she's the one who saved me." Eleanor's lips curved into a quiet smile. No rings, but plenty of roots. Tin cups lifted in a toast. No one asked for documents or signatures. Out here, love wasn't proven on paper. It was carried in calloused hands, stacked in firewood, measured in every dawn someone chose to stay. A week later, Eleanor stepped out to find Clayton fitting the final piece to the new kitchen door. She'd asked him a dozen times what he was working on, but he'd only said, "Wait." Now, in the fading light, she saw it. A bent horseshoe, shaped and polished, bolted firm as the handle. "Found it half buried near the pasture," he said. "Looked like scrap. But turns out, it just needed shaping." Her fingers traced the cool iron. She looked up, eyes soft. "Like some people," she whispered. He nodded. "Broken things can still carry weight, if they're strong enough." The days lengthened. Wildflowers returned, scattering colors across the meadows. Thomas grew stronger, his cries giving way to curious coos. And one golden evening, Eleanor sat at her desk, pulling out a piece of her father's old blue stationery. Her hand moved carefully, her heart full. "Dear P, you told me once that a home was not a place, but a feeling. I didn't believe you then, but now I do. I built this cabin. I hauled the wood, shaped the roof, fought storms. I did it for me and for my boy. But it took a stubborn cowboy with dusk in his eyes and a heart like yours to make it feel like home. We are not alone anymore. Love, your Eleanor." She folded the letter, placed it gently in her father's tin mailbox, and stepped outside. Thomas laughed. A clear, bubbling laugh, his first true one. Clayton, fixing a fence post nearby, looked up at the sound. Eleanor walked toward him, baby in her arms, the wind carrying the scent of pine and promise. Spring had come, and with it, everything she had never dared to dream. If you followed this far, if your heart clenched when Eleanor stood alone in the storm, if you felt Clayton's quiet vow, "I won't lose you too," then you already understand. It was built from pine beams and calloused hands, from sleepless nights and silent prayers, from scars no one spoke of, unless someone stayed long enough to listen. Because every week, another story waits, of hearts crossing deserts, of last embraces by the firelight, of people daring to believe in each other, even when the world tells them not to. We share the stories that slow your breath, that make you smile, that might just make you cry, and, if we're lucky, make you believe again.